the biggest act of passive aggressiveness you've ever witnessed or done? Story 1. Personally, I asked my girlfriend at the time if she would mind if I hung out with my ex and some friends after school. A simple no would have sufficed. Instead, she responded with, "I don't mind. I guess I'll hang out with my friend Eric. We usually get drunk and make out." Story 2. Long time ago, in my first managerial position, I had a boss who got pissed off at me for somewhat ridiculous reasons. I was trying to plan out a potential project with one of my staff members, and my boss overheard us. He assumed we were going to skip other work to get this request done, when, in fact, avoiding that was exactly why I was having the meeting. At any rate, he came in and absolutely dressed me down in front of my project guy. After shift change, I went to his office, and he told me he didn't want me to make any decisions without running them past him first. So for the next week, literally every decision I made, I paged him first. Like, can Tom take his break half an hour early? Or could Sally have extra supplies? 1 week later, he blew up at my co-supervisor at a staff meeting saying, "Seriously, you all need to be able to make some decisions yourselves." So my passive-aggressive response worked just fine. Story 3, this is a little specific, but a chef I used to work with was really annoyed at the other chef that worked on his section. It was a quiet Sunday night, so he did every bit of prep possible for the section. The other guy comes in Monday morning and spends 12 hours there bored shitless because he had nothing to do, and company rules ban phones in the kitchen. Story 4, me, I can do this for you, but you're behind on your invoices. You really need to get caught up. Client, how much do we owe you, me including this last job? It's amount. Client, okay. I am confident we can get that to you by the end of next week. 3 weeks later, me, hello. Just following up to see where we are on that payment. Client, no response. 2 weeks later, client, hey, our site is down. Can you get it back up for us? Me, I'm confident I can get it back up by the end of next week. Story 5, my high school chemistry teacher hated my friends and me. We started all by being high school idiots, but we were going to finish it as well. My friend would often crumple up his lab sheet and then flatten it out before handing it in. After doing this a couple of times, she said he would get a 0 the next time he did it. So after we finished our next lab, he has to go to the bathroom. He takes a sheet to the library, crumples it up, flattens it out, and then photocopies it, comes back and turns in the crumpled-looking piece of paper. Story 6, for a programming class, me and some friends created a tic-tac-toe bot that always ended games in a draw. It wasn't designed to win, only to end games in a draw. Story 7, I have a child with an ex-GF. Long story, but the short version is I haven't been allowed to see my daughter since she was 3 weeks old, but I pay child support every week. My ex's name is Brittany, and she gets offended when people spell her name Brittany, because that's how that Britney Spears spells her name. Guess how her child support checks are filled out every single week for the last 13 years. Edit. Well, this really blew up. Guess I'll have to explain the whole long story since everyone is asked. Had a friend in high school who wasn't subtle about how big of a crush she had on me. Never acted on it. First week into my second year of college, I ran into her. We both had just gone through breakups and decided to hang out. First time hanging out she wants to have, and she gives up her virginity to me also. Being a 20-year-old, I jumped at the chance. We started dating, but it wasn't a healthy relationship, constant fighting, breaking up and making up, etc. Finally ended when she gave me a black eye. Relationship only lasted 3 to 4 months. Next day, she calls me and tells me she's pregnant. I call bullshit and never heard from her again. Until 9 months later, I discover it wasn't bullshit. I had already moved on and had started dating a girl about 2 months prior. She was very supportive and would eventually become my wife. I was trying to work things out with my ex, but she wasn't happy I had moved on. She felt I would see that she's really pregnant, and we would get married. My daughter is born a few weeks later. We make an agreement about an amount I would pay her in visitation and everything. After school, I would go over to her house to spend time with my daughter. My ex was trying to make it a date night, and it was really awkward. I finally tell her I bought a car seat, and I would pick up my daughter and spend time with her and my parents. This started WW3. I get cussed out and told to get out, cutting this week's visitation short. Few days later, she calls me, tells me I can't see my daughter. She tells me it's her daughter. Only reason I was contacted was for the money, cusses me out some more, and these are the last words me and my ex ever spoke to each other. After about a year, I had graduated school and was working full-time. I increased the amount I paid her to a more acceptable level on my own. I tried to go to the courts but got the runaround. Went to the county, was told I had to go to her township court. Went to her township court, told to go to my township court. My township court tells me go to the county. I go back to the county after many days, over several weeks of running around. And this time I'm told just stop paying your support. And when she takes you to court, you can work it out. WTF. I wasn't going to not support my daughter. My ex would use my parents for daycare, but would always make sure she picked up my daughter before I got done work. Once in a blue moon, she would be there, but I felt weird being a stranger and then not knowing how many months before the next time I see her. In 2008, I'm laid off when the economy tanked. My parents, who basically have become my liaisons to my ex and for my ex, will try to pay her, but with my unemployment, I can't guarantee it will be the full amount. I increased it to 24 hours later, am served with papers from her family's lawyer, wanting to sever my rights and transfer them to her parents for health insurance. I write to her lawyer and explain my side and how I haven't been able to see my daughter. I receive a phone call from her lawyer. He explains the provision in the agreement where I can visit my daughter when they're used as babysitters, then explains to me I'm unemployed, don't have a lawyer. If I fight this, it will end badly for me. I look into free legal services and realize unless I'm homeless and broke, it's not free. I borrow $500 from my parents to have the free services look over the agreement, tell me it's fine, and tells me to sign it. My parents are no longer allowed contact with my daughter, so I don't get to see her via their little loophole. The agreement lists the amount I increase the support to, but says it will be done out of court, so that's why I write a check instead of having it come out of my paycheck. I have never missed a payment and don't plan on it. Eve consulted with a lawyer on more than one occasion and get the same answer. Should have come before I waited so long, before I signed the paperwork, and pretty give me the same answer. It will be a long, expensive battle with no guarantee of winning. I happen to know my daughter's godmother, another high school classmate. She had a falling out with my ex, but is very involved with my daughter's life. She sympathizes with me, occasionally will send me photos of my daughter. Yes, I made plenty of mistakes, and I know I could have done more, but no, it's to the point of too little too late. My mistakes, and I own them. Main reason I don't want my daughter stuck in the middle of a bitter dispute. I gave up, and it does hurt. Hopefully I can explain my side one day. Knowing my ex, I either don't exist, or she bashes me constantly. I would try my best to explain my side without bashing her mom. Yes, it's petty to misspell my ex's name, but it's the only thing I got. Story 8, it was at work. I bake stuff and bring it in for my coworkers pretty frequently. One of our administrators brought in some brownies on a day that I had brought in cookies. She took that personally and actually removed my cookies from the common area and hid them in her office so that only her brownies were available. So I went to her office, reclaimed my Tupperware, and told her I'd keep the cookies in my office till her brownies were gone. On the way out of her office, the systems guys came by like, "Dude, where'd the cookies go? We thought they were out. Can we have some?" Of course I said yes, and passed out cookies while half standing in our administrator's office while she stared daggers at me. Story 9, I live in a house with thin walls and squeaky floors. My housemate, whose room is across from mine, has always been active at night. That's when he practices his singing, makes phone calls, and stomps around the house, slamming the doors behind him. It was a little annoying but harmless until I started my surgery clerkship last month. This meant waking at 4 in the morning every Monday through Saturday. A few days before I was to begin, I spoke with my housemate and gave him a heads up, asking very politely if he could keep it down after 9 p.m. in return. I would be as quiet as possible in the morning and move my morning routine shower, lunch prep to the evening. He agreed, but didn't actually change anything. 3 days into my first week of surgery, after one too many instances of our bathroom's door being slammed too hard late at night, I decided to move my shower to 3:30 a.m. and park directly outside his bedroom window. The car is old and the engine loud. It took just over a week of being woken at 330, but he's now quiet by 8. Story 10, biggest act I did. I had an English teacher I really disliked in high school. She was one of those grammar purists. I'm pretty sure she knew I used the singular they shed yell, so she drank like 3 Pepsis a day and one day decided to give up Pepsi to improve her health. I came in with a bottle of Pepsi the next day and drank it nonchalantly during class. I don't even like Pepsi, lol. Story 11, I was working during the morning at the counter, and we just opened the shop. Not even around 20 minutes has passed, and this older lady comes up to the counter with her granddaughter and shows me her old battery in her hand with a pissed-off look in her face like I peed in her cereal. I stare at her for a couple of seconds, and as she sighs, pauses, and then says, "Batteries." I stare at her, and with the politest tone I could muster, I tell her they're just in front of the counter around 2 steps away, and she starts looking at USB sticks. I say in the most polite and pleasant voice with as much bubbliness as I could muster, "Oh no, not there, just to the left," and she spots them. I tell her she's got it and continue my business. She grabs the battery she needs, but then pauses and dramatically says, "You know what, I'm not going to buy these. I'll go to another store that will have decent customer service who will help me," and storms out while her grandchild is staring at her like a confused Bambi. I said, "Okay, goodbye," as soon as she said that, and she stormed out with her very confused granddaughter. There are harsher demons to care about in retail beyond a passive-aggressive woman who expected me to mind read and didn't politely ask for help. Besides, it was 20 minutes after we opened. I wasn't awake enough to care. Edit, sorry, my friends, I didn't realize that I missed writing this, but it was her old battery she was just handing to me. not from the store, and she gave me no conversation, just stared into my soul. It was very strange. Edit 2, wow. Guys, I didn't realize I had so many upvotes. That's insane. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the love. Story 12, a couple of years ago, 2012 or something, I was in high school attending a computer science class. The exercises were so outdated that they stated that we had to hand it in on a floppy disk, so I did. Story 13, back during my degree. I was doing an essay about typographical trends. My lecturer and I had a disagreement about something to do with another project, something about a display, or something I don't quite recall. I handed the essay on time, but with each word successively in Arial, Helvetica, and Gil Sans drove him nuts. Story 14, when I was still married, my ex's parents' Christmas gift to us one year was that they offered to pay for me to have a vasectomy. We hadn't discussed anything, even broaching that subject with them. Story 15, at the mall, sitting in a chair waiting for someone, a woman with cane walks up to the seating area and says to herself, all the seats are taken. They'll just have to hope I don't fall down. Someone then offers her a seat, and 2 minutes later, she says something about it being long enough and gets up and walks off again. Playing martyr was apparently more important than sitting down. Story 16, I had a math teacher who I didn't like, so I did my homework in the top tiny square of the paper where the lines met, showing my work and everything, just ridiculously tiny. Story 17, biggest one Eve done. In high school, the English teacher hated Wikipedia with a passion, saying it's unreliable and anyone can edit it. So for my research paper, I proved Wikipedia was a reliable source, and not everyone can edit pages. She hated it so much and constantly asked me to write about something different. Story 18, I used to do laundry at a funky mat in the UK. For some reason, they put a 15 shelf below the doors of the dryers for people to put their baskets on as they emptied the dryer. On a very busy day, one decided to fold his clothes individually in this shelf instead of moving everything to a table and freeing up the dryer. To make things worse, he was minutely examining every item he pulled out of the dryer. A woman very nicely asked him if he wouldn't mind moving to a table so she could use the dryer. This elicited an astonishing display of profanity and rudeness that had me wondering if this guy had Tourette's or something. The lady realized she was dealing with it and backed off. Rather disappointingly, I thought. She found another dryer and sat down again. A few minutes later, finishes his folding and, still blocking the dryer with all the folded, goes to get a rolling cart to take his stuff to the car. Lady sees her chance and grabs it, opens the dryer door, throws in all his carefully folded stuff, and feeds the coin slot. The guy went ballistic when he came back, but somehow no one in the entire place had seen what happened. Story 19, so I feel really, really bad about this now, but I was at a Subway sandwiches, not the underground train, and there was a bus of Chinese tourists in front of me in line. They took a while to order because they spoke mostly broken English, but they got through it. Now I walk up and I hear the Subway lady mutter under her breath, great. Another chink, I'm also Asian. Now I understand that dealing with a bunch of tourists who ordered in broken English is hard, but this really set me off. I proceed to order, being the most indecisive I can while using the most broken English I can, adding in random ching-chongs and ling-longs and every other ridiculous rhyming iteration of that I can, and just proceed to waste her time. Now, when I finally get to the cashier, I have a sandwich which has been remade 3 times because the sandwich lady misunderstood me because of my bad English and piled high with every single topping and sauce. I go up to pay and say in perfect English, racism really makes me lose my appetite. Keep the sandwich. And then I walked out nonchalantly, treasuring the look of pure rage on the Subway lattice face. Story 20, when I was in high school, we had an oil painting unit in our art class. Oil paint is expensive, so we were given really small tubes and told to use only as much as we needed. We were painting a lot of fall-type plants, things like squash, gourds, etc. Needless to say, there was a lot of yellow in these compositions, and most people used up their yellow tubes right away. There was this upperclassman girl in my class that was a total stuck-up snob and took every chance she could to throw me under the bus for some reason. I think she thought I was a threat to her because we were both very artistically inclined, although the extent of her abilities was just copying paintings that she found online. NYWAYS. We all kept our paints in shoeboxes, and one day, I went to class to find that my nearly full tube of yellow paint was gone. I look over, and sure enough, the upperclassman snob has it. I was pissed, but I didn't want to make a scene, so I went up to her and asked, "Hey, can I borrow some of your yellow?" She looks at me, gives me the snobbiest, most disgusting look I had ever seen in my life, and says, "Only a little bit, that was the last straw." I took the tube and squeezed out the entire thing on my palette. It was oil paint, so I was able to keep it wet until I was done with it. Story 21, my wife and I have been planning on going on a weekend-long couples retreat for 3 months. We lined up the babysitters, her parents and mine, set aside the necessary funds, and waited in anticipation. The weekend finally comes. We drop the kids off at my folks' place because they're watching them for night one. They can't watch the kids for the second night because of a play my younger sister was involved in. There's also a storm happening at the same location our retreat was planned. My mother-in-law is a fearmonger and told us not to go because she feared for our safety. The place we were headed gets storms frequently, and occasionally there's a tree that falls over, but that is about it. Anyway, she really doesn't want us to go, but my wife and I need a break from the kids, so we say we're going anyways. She then calls my wife and spends a half hour on the phone, literally crying about not going for fear of her child dying and leaving her grandchildren orphaned. Sunday evening, when we return, we find out that she had picked up the kids that day at noon, meaning she had left them at my parents' place the night before, so my mother wasn't able to go watch her daughter perform in the play. We asked her why she backed out, and she said she was too stressed to deal with the children. She bailed on watching her grandkids for a night because we went on a trip that she thought was too dangerous, causing issues with my parents. Edit phrasing. Story 22. My high school biology teacher would always give us homework sheets to fill in and hand back. I always folded it and put it in my pocket, and she would always complain to me that my work was too creased. Being the lovely student that I was, I learned origami, and when I next handed in a homework, it was in the shape of an X-Wing fighter. Story 23. My old neighbors at my duplex. I lived on the bottom half. They had the top. I have lived there for about 6 months happily with my large dog frolicking off leash in the backyard, which the landlord had approved, and all that. There were 4 large pine trees along the back of the yard. My dog preferred to do his business near the back of the yard under those trees or right near them. It was a large yard, the width of 3 school buses. These new neighbors show up right around April, so there's less snow, but still lots of ice back there. They seem nice. I remember meeting the guy one day as I was walking to the backyard to put some stuff in my shed. He said, "I like being a good neighbor, keeping the yard clean." I agreed and said I was willing to split the duties of mowing the lawn when the grass started to get a bit long. About a week and I get a call from my landlord. He says the folks upstairs have complained about the in the yard. I was baffled. It was still ice back there. Now don't get me wrong here, there was for sure, but I thought it was just widely known that you do the spring scoop when the ice is melted. Landlord said to him, it was no big deal, just pick up what I could and call it a day. So out I go and pick up some of the frozen poops. But there's some that I kind of just smeared around in the mushy ground ice. So I left those because, hey, they're already turning back into ground at this point. The snow really started to melt about 2 weeks later. So out I go and start scooping up I put it in the little wooden composting bin that I'd set up at the very back of the yard. I never used it. It was mostly for grass trimmings. I figured the folks upstairs would be happy, hunky-dory. Hey, race the deal. I wake up for work at 3:30, leaving the house by 420. I had an agreement with the landlord to pick up the dog as frequently as possible to keep the yard clean. That was fine with me because I used it lots. He agreed that following my dog around in the dark waiting for him was silly, and that picking it up later was absolutely not an issue. He was a pretty great dude, had dogs himself, so he understood what it was like. These folks upstairs also had a dog, but their personal belief was that the yard had to be pristine at all times. They picked up after their little pooch right after it went. Their dog was incredibly antisocial and hated everyone as well, apartment dog that was never socialized. So, as a courtesy to them, whenever I saw their wee dog out there on its leash, I wouldn't let my dog out. They never used the yard except to let their dog out to go to the bathroom. They had a nice deck to sit on and would frequently barbecue and eat on there. So again, whenever I heard them outside, I would keep my dog indoors. They started complaining every time they saw Ada the landlord. Never once did they come and say anything to me. It got to the point where my landlord stopped them and said, listen, I have an agreement with her. If you have a problem with it, just talk to her. I consider myself a pretty reasonable person. I would have loved to have chatted with them about it, but they never once knocked on my door. So one day I come home from work, let the dog out, and follow him outside. They've spray painted a circle around this continues for a week. I come home to all these paint circles around the yard. I actually thought it was pretty hilarious and took photos to send to the landlord. He told them to stop spray painting his yard. Then they decided they'd just stop mowing half the lawn as a protest. I actually thought it was really funny because I knew how OCD the dude was about mowing the lawn in these perfect diagonal lines. The duties were still split. The difference is that I didn't give a flying how long my grass got. So I mowed my half every 2 weeks, as per the original agreement. They continued to mow their side. I figured mowing half a lawn was a pretty sweet deal. Oh boy, was I wrong. I got a call from the landlord saying that the city bylaw had called them. They had inspected the yard over a complaint about feces in yard, to which they said it was an invalid complaint, and they were proceeding. I was shocked. Of course it wasn't valid. There was a single in the yard from that morning, so I smoldered. I did not want to speak to these people face to face because I knew I would not keep it together. I tried to enter a space of zen for a span of about a month. I continued with my regular routine. I knew they were furious, but they just would not come and speak to me. They'd stare out their window and make rude gestures with their hands, to which I would shake my head at. One weekend I was sick and spent my days just opening the door, letting the dog out to go to the bathroom. I didn't pick up poops. Monday came and went. Tuesday, I was back at work. I get back home around 11 a.m. and take my dog around the side. He ran ahead of me and started barking. I heard a little voice from my yard saying, "Can you grab your dog, please?" I run further into the back, and there's a woman with a little notepad standing near the cedars. I immediately call my dog and put him inside. The woman is from bylaw and came because there was a complaint about feces. I introduce myself and ask her if there's anything I can do. She says if she could show me where my dog typically goes to do his business, that'd be great. So I walk her back to the trees. There's 4 poops. She walks around the rest of the yard and comes back to me. "I have 3 dogs," she starts, "and your yard is cleaner than mine is. This complaint is invalid. I'm sorry to waste your time." That's when I explain to her my neighbor problem. She tells me not to worry, and that this seems like it's going to be a continuous boy who cried wolf situation. So I walk her back to her car with a handshake and a wave, and start walking back on my driveway to see the guy neighbors standing in the window. I wave with a smile and go inside. They called the landlord again and complained. The landlord said either deal with it or get out. I won't hold you to your lease. They shut up. I wound up leaving about 3 months later, but before I did, I collected a pile from the compost and placed it in the center of the yard in a magnificent little mound. Story 24 in a choir I directed. We welcomed a new tenor who had a great voice and added perfectly to the ensemble. The tenor next to him, however, was jealous of the new singer's ability and said, "If I had a voice like yours, I wouldn't think to subject others to it in choir, but would sing solo instead." Story 25 convinced my Mimi was the inventor of passive aggression. She passed it on to my dad, and then to myself. They're the professionals, though. Hey Race, a story of passive aggression. My dad was married to this lunatic for a while that the entire family hated. My Mimi refused to ever go to their house and would not let the lady come to their house for holidays. Lisa, crazy ex-stepmom, would say hi to Mimi, and Mimi would act like she was deaf. When my dad finally left her, him and my brother were packing their stuff, and Lisa tried telling my brother that my dad has brainwashed him into thinking she's bad. She brings my brother all of my dad's DVDs and says, "This is what kind of man your dad is. He watches this." My brother just laughed. They put their bags in the car. Lisa tries to lock them out, but she accidentally shut her dog out with them. When she let the dog in, my dad went in and grabbed only his and left forever. When we went back a couple of months later to move his stuff out, my Mimi came. She's the single most vicious person I've ever met, and I was so nervous about being there. I go in, and Mimi is walking around all jolly and singing to herself. I was so confused, and then I realized that her very presence was the insult to Lisa. Mimi refused to ever visit that house, but here she was happily helping my dad move out it. Lisa started yelling at me while we were there, and Mimi just went walking through the room singing songs. It was killing me. My dad and Lisa had some toys, and Lisa had set them out on display in the living room to try to embarrass my dad. She loudly announces with Mimi in the room, "I don't want those anymore. You can take them with you." My dad goes, "Great. Hey, Mimi, can you pack those for me?" And Mimi happily packed away their toys. Edit: a Mimi is a grandmother. She was my dad's mom. Edit 2, just to give you a bigger dose of Mimi's viciousness. Her and my grandfather got in an argument once. To get back at him, she ran away. By runaway, I mean she hid her car on the property and locked herself in her bathroom. They used separate bathrooms. She would only come out when my grandfather had left the house. She did this for a week. Story 26, when I was in college, I was in a group project called Capstone, where we built an entire enterprise network, including hosts, branches, servers, etc. Everything that we learned, well, the 2 people that I was supposed to be working with didn't do anything at all. I asked my instructor if I could be reassigned or work alone, to which he told me no. So I worked independently anyways. I made a network, etc. But when it came time to present, I completely bombed it on purpose. I did no servers. I used basic DSL to the public internet for my only connection to the host, and used free DNS to do my DNS because I cheaped out on static IPs. I used static routing for everything. No switching, no port security, a complete bomb. My group received a 15 on our capstone and caused my 2 group mates to fail out of the capstone project. That night, I emailed a PowerPoint presentation, project documentation and timeline, an 88-page technical document to my professor, as well as explaining the reason I did what I did. He told me that this would be unacceptable in the professional world and would get me fired, but he changed my individual grade to 93. Also, I work with one of the girls from my group now, and she's still answering end-user calls all day. Muahaha. Story 27 had a former coworker that when writing his child support payment check to his ex-wife, he would address the envelope as names changed Heather Johnson Williams Smith. Butler. Edit: the marriage didn't end well as he caught her cheating. Then she cheated on the next one, and the next one. Story 28 was riding on the bus at 7 a.m. after a 3 p.m. to 6 a.m. double shift. Needless to say, I was tired as now. This specific route tends to be very crowded in the mornings, but my work was near the start of it, so I'd always get a seat and then proceed to fall asleep in it. So this group of middle-aged women get up at the next stop, and now the bus is full. So one of them stands next to me and says, "I guess there are no more gentlemen in this world." So I did what my half-asleep mind wanted and proceeded to say, "Oh, I'm sorry, yes, there are. I'm afraid seats is what's short," and procked to fall back asleep. Yeah, that was an uncomfortable 45-minute ride home. Story 29, one of my coworkers unplugs the fridge because it makes too much noise. The office manager installed a lock over the outlet, so you can't unplug it now. Story 30, worked at McDonald's in high school. At the time, we closed at 11. Most nights we would get a drive-thru order around 10:45 for 8 to 12 double cheeseburgers and an equal number of waters. Every single time the persons placing the order were high as, and they always came through after I had just cleaned off the grill for the night. We would make some extra meat ahead in case someone came in, but not enough for 8 doubles. It's like they waited in the parking lot until I finished cleaning up and then came to order. So I devised a scheme of my own as punishment for making me work late to clean everything again. They would get their cheeseburgers and all of their water, except one of the waters would be carbonated. Story 31, when my son was still an infant months old, my husband would pick him up and do baby talk and be like, "Did mommy forget to do X and Y?" I was right there. I would then go to our son. "Yes, daddy, too much of a wussy to say that to mommy when SHES 5 feet away." He finally stopped. I busted his so much about it. We now jokingly communicate that way to each other all the time, but now we don't curse or say anything horrible like that in front of our 2-year-old, but when he's not around, it's funny. Story 32, holy, I actually have a decent answer. Working at Tim Hortons up here in Canada. You get all sorts of crazy people through the drive-thru. Each and every single one of them got some sort of snark, be it overt politeness and a way too sunny smile, or a specialized something or other. Any overweight, rude person would always get the same treatment, though I'd get their order nice and ready. Then I'd work on the next few orders and let the person sit at the window. If no orders were after them, I'd take some personal time and maybe eat or drink something. I'd run to the back and then run back real quick to get out of breath, then hand out the order and say, "I'm sorry for your wait. I got a few looks, but no one could say about it. It was petty and stupid, but I was 17 and edgy as..." Story 33, at school, I was once punished for running in the library. Except I wasn't running, it was 2 other people, and I was adamant I was not going to accept punishment for a crime I didn't commit. Said punishment was writing a 2-page essay about my actions, and why I shouldn't do them again. The essay that was written, the entire song lyrics to the Badger 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 song for 2 pages. I was then given detention after school and told to write another essay. Initially, it started as a remorseful groveling about lessons learnt, which after 2 paragraphs devolved into Badger 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 ad nauseum. Looking back, it would have been easier to accept the initial punishment, but when you're a rebellious little Badger Badger Badger, it is. Story 34, I got in trouble in digital design for doing a mock DVD cover on a joke horror movie. It starred me and a couple of friends, and I thought it was hilarious. It was called The West Chronicles. Well, I guess that was inappropriate for school, and I got suspended. I came back the following Monday and redid the DVD cover and called it The West Chronicles of Kittens and Rainbows, just to make sure I was being within the limits. Edit, apparently the premise of having a killer in my mock movie wasn't school appropriate. Story 35, my fiancée purposely puts the toilet paper on wrong. It's all in good fun. She likes to get a rise out of me. At first she played stupid, so I literally wrote this side out on every roll of TP. If you can't tell, I really hate toilet paper being on wrong. She would put on the roll, but the text would be upside down, just to with me. I'll be taking a dump, go to wipe, and the toilet paper is coming out of the back. So they'll tell her she put it on wrong, and I fix it. An hour later, it'll go to blow my nose, and it's back all up. Now I'm yelling, not angrily, more like Jerry Seinfeld's yell. She just laughs her off. We pick our battles, but I am making a Custerian stand on the proper way to mount toilet paper. I'm literally putting in my vows that I will forever correct the toilet paper and shall never win this war. This is household domestic terrorism. I do not negotiate with terrorists. She also purposely buys Charmin Ultra Soft instead of Ultra Strong. My is hairy. Ultra Soft gets ripped to shreds like my hole is a Cuisinart food processor. I now buy the TP. I need to put some sanctions in place.